Okay, there we go. Well, hey, what up, what up, what up? It is another episode of the Shark Cove. Today, what a weird day we had today in the LEC and the LCS, and I mean, maybe in the LPL. Staying up kind of, I don't know. We've been getting a lot of these losing teams be optimal. It's hard to kind of predict that, it's hard to project it, but it is what it is. And then we started off with a banger in the LEC, and from there out, it was just snoozer after snoozer. That worked out for yesterday's Shark Cove guest, Cody, as he took that down in the chop, and then was able to take down the LCS as well. FlyQuest looked very, very pedestrian, and EG looked very good today. I think that's just what you're going to see from those two teams. They're right there at the upper echelon. But I do have some concerns for 100 Thieves. So that's just something we want to monitor moving forward. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to run through each one of these games coming up on the slate later today, see where we're going to take a stand, what we feel good about, and kind of take it from there. I'm going to run this solo. I don't have a ton of time. But I do want to do this. You guys requested it. So let's go ahead. Let's walk through it. Let me get my screen up here. Boom, boom. There we go. It's obviously too small. Maybe I'll do this. Does that work? That might work. Let's get that a little bit bigger. That should be fine. All right. Fantastic. So let's talk about this early game. Let's go over to the LPL first. Absolute banger to start it off. So I'm pretty excited about that. And it feels like a lot of these times when you have these 5-game slates, and especially on the weekend, well, that's when we have the 5-game slates, right? The 2:00 game often feels like it's, TT and FPX. Now they're both at 2:15 on this. Is that what's going on? Am I missing something here? What do we have on DraftKings? Which one's actually the first one? Are they going to be played at the same time? That would be wild. Okay, no, of course not. All right, yeah. So we'll pump the brakes. The excitement's not there. The very first game of the day is going to be FPX TT. Not sure that one's necessarily one that's worth waking up for or staying awake for. This game should absolutely roll. FPX minus 700. TT have looked awful. I know that we've been taking stabs at TT from time to time, depending on who they're playing, and those have not worked out. And, the question that you have to ask yourself here with FPX, at least for me, is like, do I want to play FPX? Clid's coming in. I feel like they're a little bit slower when Clid's on the team. And maybe he wasn't benched the last series. Maybe he had something going on or some other reason that Beishan played and then he was put in. Maybe this team's just not clicking behind the scenes. It doesn't matter. They're playing TT. The question that you have to ask yourself is, are they going to get enough kills for you to justify playing them? I think that they're going to garner some ownership, but being how expensive they are and some of the juicier games that are on the slate, I don't know how much ownership. I do think that a lot of people will look to them as kind of a safety valve in the sense that, if I'm putting a Victory 5 in there, I want to make sure I get the other side right. And the FPX team slot, maybe like an LWX and the top laner, those guys combined can give me something of safety in what's going to be perceived as a 2-0 sweep. I do think that the over-under on this game in particular is fairly high. Let's see. Not really. I mean, we're looking at 23.5, which is kind of it's a super low number for the LPL. Just by contrast, we are looking at 26.5 in this game. And I would imagine that this one's probably pretty similar. So, yeah, I just don't know how much I want to have invested in that. If anything, that might be the reason to play it. If you remember, what was it, like a week and a half ago, the Gen G situation where they were the most expensive on the slate, they did have a ceiling game because, look, there is entirely a possibility that FPX, botches the final push, and what would have been a 15 kill game turns into a 19 or 22 or whatever the case is. And that's kind of what you're hoping for if you're playing them in GPPs. I haven't played with the pricing, but I suspect that's kind of the thought process when you're looking at the TTFPX series. Jumping over to the LCK, we've got Gen G and DRX. Again, this one doesn't, jump out at me as one that I'm particularly excited to play. People do like playing Gen G, and there's good reason for that. I mean, look, they're going to be a heavy favorite in most of their games. They're a minus 300 favorite here. People do tend to like playing DRX as well. But DRX had that little run, and I know that this isn't completely updated, but on both sides of wins and losses, this is not a particularly bloody team. They haven't gotten to 20 kills at all this year, unless it's in one of the games that I don't have updated. And they've only given up more than 17 kills like a handful of times. So, do I want to go to a Gen G team that is at a little bit of a discount, but is perfectly comfortable in that 15, 16, 17 range in terms of kills, and that's how they finish their game? Probably not. I don't hate it. Again, I think that people look to these type of games as safety and small stacks. And we'll discuss as we get into this next game over in the LPL where we can avoid, feeling like we can't play some of the chalkier teams. So, yesterday we talked about it, and give me a second here. Okay, so we talked about like not playing WE, or Nathan's theory to not play WE because they're going to be the highest owned dog. They're going to be overowned. And while that can be true, I think the one thing that we maybe didn't think about, or if you are going to play a team like that and you want it to be a leverage situation, is taking that high owned dog and not pairing it with a favorite. So, in BLG and JDG, we're not playing the JDG with like FPX. We're not playing them with a Gen G. We're instead going to go ahead and play them with, like a Victory 5. I think that'll actually be popular, or more so if you really want to get off the board, like a JDG with something like a Sandbox or a Nongshim. I think those are ways that you can get exposure to that team that might break the slate, and then, not necessarily be as chalky, be very different. And look, on the surface, that sounds kind of crazy. It doesn't necessarily sound like something that you want to do, but think about what would have won yesterday, or what did win. I don't know. I didn't look at the lineup that won the GPP. I did look at the scores. And so I think some combination, whether or not somebody had it, of we and Bro was optimal. And I will tell you that there was no ownership on Bro. Even in the main GPP, not worth trying to avoid to be different. In fact, you would just be different by playing them. So, that's a route that I would think about taking, because I think that this BLG JDG game is going to be absolutely the most popular one on the slate for a lot of good reasons. All of those reasons are JDG, basically. This is a team that plays fast. They get a lot of kills. They give up a lot of kills when they lose. I think BLG is probably the team that is going to win this series, but by no means is this like the FPX or TT. When we look at what FPX or what BLG and JDG have done thus far this season, and the teams that they've played, and what they've done against those teams, JDG, again, has beaten FPX. This does not look as good as it maybe did at one point. They've beaten LGD, OMG, WE. They don't really have that premier win on their resume. They've lost to Top Esports. They've lost to RNG. They've lost to IG and EDG. So, facing a team like BLG, who conversely does have, a premier win against Weibo, a decent win against RA, and a couple other games. But, they're overall, looking at them, they don't look as strong either. Now, a second here. I feel like they've played some of these other teams. I could be totally wrong here, just mixing up the series. Let me see something. look at BLG, Weibo. That was that. Yeah, okay. I guess they haven't. So do we really know anything about either of these teams? When it comes to the statistics, they do kind of point towards BLG being the better team, but I don't necessarily think that we can hang our hat on anything that they've done. That win against Weibo seems like it was ages ago, and they've had some pretty tough losses. But the concern that I have is if BLG is going to be the one that wins this series, I feel like they win a lot of games when they play their style, and when they get dragged into these wild games like the ones against IG, they seem to struggle, and those seem to be the type of games that JDG wants to play or plays very well. So it's going to be a clash of styles, and I think people will go on one side or the other. It just doesn't feel like a JDG night for me, but I totally understand the play, and I'm not going to hate it. Yo, Pete, how's it going? So when we go ahead and take a look at the next game, the one that I'm kind of interested in, and there should be no surprise here, is Sandbox versus Red Force. We've found a lot of different opportunities that we can go ahead and hang our hat on Sandbox, and they've come through almost every single time. And that is to say we haven't gone to them very frequently. This is a game against a Red Force team that I'm kind of crossing off. They are strange in the sense that I don't know if I even really know who they are at this point, because the COVID issues that they had gave us like makeshift versions of the team. But even when they were playing together, the problem is that Ghost and BDD don't have very good kill participation. They don't have huge kill shares. You don't feel safe going to any part of that team. I think when you're playing that team, you almost want to play the top side of the map. You want to play, a top or a jungler. And so it does make it a very attractive position if you want to do like a captain Kanavi and go ahead and play that with NS. But at that point you're playing a dog with an LCK favorite that isn't one that gets a ton of kills, and you're doing it with a jungle captain. I mean, okay, I don't think that it's the worst thing in the world, because then you are getting every one of the carries from JDG in there, whether it's Kanavi, Yago, Hope, and then you can either play like the top laner from JDG, and then maybe like put like Peter in there, because I like Peter. I think he scores well, which is kind of weird as the whole team doesn't score well, but Peter tends to score okay. But on the other side of it, Sandbox is kind of the opposite of that. They are a team that doesn't get a ton of kills, but they are a team that when they do get kills, they're all together. It's just this series to me is going to be a 2-0. It's one way or the other. Either Red Force comes out, wins the first game, controls this. Are we going to get that extra fight? Are we going to get standoffs? I think you can go to Sandbox. I think you can go to Red Force if you believe in them. I will tell you personally, I probably won't have any Red Force. I may or may not have some Sandbox. We'll see. When we get into this last game, and this is the one that is the hardest for me to predict in terms of ownership, is this LNG Victory 5 game, where Victory 5 is absolutely a team that you want a part of when they win. They're absolutely something that you want a part of when they lose. LNG seems like they're optimal on every single slate that they play. So I guess the thing for me is not to overthink this. I want to play LNG, not Victory 5. That's where I'm hanging my hat. This is kind of a coin flip. Let's take a look at who they've played. And at first, let's pop over here and take a look at some of their stats. Again, not fully updated, but this LNG team, for whatever reason, when they are on a slate, they, despite their lower scores, tend to be on the optimal side of the slate. Like everybody else plays slowly. You get all these low kill total games. And this slate kind of feels like it could be one of those. I mean, I would have no surprise to see that FPX beats TT 15-3 both games, something close to that. That Gen G beats DRX like 12-3 and then like 16-7 or something. That wouldn't surprise me either. That Nongshim Sandbox series going 15-3, 15-4 in both of their games, not a shock at all. And if BLG beats JDG, I can see something similar, albeit a little bit more bloody, more like in the 17-19 range. And maybe JDG takes a game, and that game is something similar, keeping all of the scores for everybody down. laying the groundwork for LNG to come in with their 79 through 89 point scores in every position to be the absolute nuts on the slate. Look, you got to pick a side of this game. These other ones, like I said, don't necessarily profile as bloody as this one. LNG, when they lose big. When V5 wins, man, they get a ton of kills. Aside from those games where they absolutely rolled over IG and did it in 17 minutes back to back, they get close to 20 kills, more than 20 kills. This is the bloodiest team, I think, in the 4 major regions. And they give up a lot of deaths, too, when they lose. And, they lose the first game of a series quite frequently. That opens the door, I think, for LNG to kind of close the series out in that game 2 or game 3 after they take game 1. I would be very worried if I was LNG backer and they dropped the first game. Seems like that could happen. This does seem like it's a premier series on the night. So pretty excited to watch that one. Let's take a look real quick at kind of the tail of the tape with these two teams and who they've played. Victory 5 has beaten quite a few good teams. As this year started, I don't know. I guess I didn't think Victory 5 was going to be a top tier team, but as they've beaten RNG, they, got that win in the early season over RA where things started to click. And then they've beaten recently EDG, except for their dropping of a series to Weibo. Like, this is a top 3, top 4 team. Now, LNG on the same token is a team that has had tremendous success and has beaten some of these big names. They beat FPX. Again, that doesn't look as good, but they're still a quality team. They beat BLG. They've beaten RA. They also lost to Weibo. The loss to RNG for me is the biggest problem with this LNG team. I don't know, man. Like if I'm pick, it's hard. I'm gonna have exposure on both sides of this. If you're playing 3 lineups, I think you should have one of each, and then kind of maybe pair it with like Sandbox, or you're looking to pair it with JDG. I think one of the most popular pairings is going to be this game with JDG, and I'm not even sure what you can actually do with that, but it feels like whoever is the underdog in that series, and I don't think either of those teams are very expensive, is just going to garner a ton of ownership with JDG. So I'd almost say that find a way to get different, get away from playing JDG with either of these teams. And if you are going to play JDG, like I said, playing it with the second LCK game feels like the spot where you're going to get the most leverage. And obviously it's not the most optimal situation from a projection standpoint, but we losing the series and still being optimal doesn't necessarily feel like it should win a slate either, but it did. Yeah, I mean, look, I think V5 is going to be ultra popular. I'm just trying to debate whether or not they're going to be the most popular team on the slate. It's one of those things where people have watched them and kind of understand that they're good. People like playing the parts of Victory 5. So when they're an underdog in a matchup and they've just been so consistent. We can take a look at teams like whether it's Weibo, whether it's Anyone's Legend, whether it's IG, whether it's some of these teams that are relatively bad but really good for fantasy, even OMG for that matter. And they've had games, they've had series where they haven't lived up to the expectation. They have not been optimal. They get in these low-scoring affairs, and that's just not the case with Victory 5. When they come to skirmish, they come to play, and you have to have a part of that team. The part that you don't want to have typically is Rich. And I think there are better top laners on the slate today that you can play as opposed to Rich. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at the pricing. I don't have any projections in. So let me just pull this up, bring this over. This is yesterday. Let's take a look at this game. So when we're looking at the top lane, FBX super expensive, Nongshim super expensive, and that's just why I don't think Nongshim is going to be very owned. I actually think maybe there's a good chance that Sandbox is higher owned than Nongshim, just looking at the pricing. BLG, JDG, I think it's a toss-up, man. I think a lot of people are going to play both sides of that. So I don't know if you can get leverage on playing one side or the other. That's not a situation kind of like where you saw all of this ownership today on like FlyQuest or all this ownership on Misfits, and you could go to the other side. I mean, people are sharp in that. I think they understand that some of these coin flip matches where somebody is going to have a lot of ownership, you can get on the other side of it. And you saw that in Vitality's ownership, not so much in IMT's ownership. But you do see it, and so I'm not sure. I think it's closer. It's not as much of a coin flip as you might think, but I don't think it's as far as some people might perceive. I definitely think BLG is the deserved favorite. It's just a matter of how they play together. I think that at times they feel disjointed, whether Doggo's late to a fight or they've set up or they initiate the fight too early. This is a team that is a lot of different pieces moving together. I do think that if you are going to play them, while you should include Doggo, I would consider, like a Fofo captain. And who can you play? I mean, like that seems like a good spot to start here. I don't think you can do this, but let's try it anyway. Let's go here. Let's go here. What do we got left? 5,300. I mean, look, this is a spot that you can go to. I like this. I like this lineup. I think that might be a lineup that you can run. If you can't see it, it's just basically a Fofo captain for 3. I think that this is a strong lineup right here. Does it have the highest ceiling? Is it going to project the best? Probably not. You definitely can go with a light captain or with a Doggo and do that traditionally through the ADC. But if you want exposure to games that you think are going to be slightly chalky, that's a way to go. And Fofo has actually been doing very well and scoring a ton of fantasy points. He's really taken over a different role with BLG than maybe he had with RA. And that goes a lot to the play style that BLG has versus RA. When we're looking at, give me a second. Let me change these rules real quick. Let's get rid of top, sup, and team. Let's play this. Let's apply the settings. Let's go back to the player pool. Let's use the optimizer settings. Let's see. Let's make sure we don't have him. Actually, let's go through all of these. No. We'll just see what's possible here. And actually, let's go back to this. Settings. Just get rid of the jungle. Let's see what we can do. Let's see. There's no Frigid, no XLB, Sylvie. Young Jay's not there. No Quid. No Pudding. Little spot or effort. All right, let's do it with my pool. Let's filter these teams. See if this works without projections. So you can do mid captain with FPX and LNG. This build right here, it looks like it's a 3-4. You can do probably anything here. Yeah, you can do ADC captain with FPX, Victory 5. Can you do it the other? I'm sure you can do it the other way, right? Where we take him, get rid of whoa, I don't want to get rid of him. That's my bad. Let's bring him back. I don't want to get rid of you. We want to just lock you in, bud. It's not what I wanted to do, actually. Why is River there? Never understand that. Can't get half the people in here, but we get River in there. Can we do that? Yeah. So, I mean, you can do probably just about anything with those two teams. I think that'll be kind of popular. What can you do with BLG, FPX? Can you do anything here? Yeah, they sure have. I mean, like, again, I think that it's just you're playing into that narrative that they've done that with other people as well, that they're super expensive and there are more attractive spots. But, make no mistake about it, FPX has a tremendously high ceiling in this. It's just maybe it's not achieved as often. If we're running 100 different simulations, they're probably the top scoring on the slate, less than like a Victory 5 and LNG, BLG, JDG, and probably closer to that of Gen G. It's not to say that it doesn't happen. It's just to say it's not going to happen as frequently. And so, you could very easily get a two-game sweep here. And, you see some of these guys score in the 50s and 60s just because it was not like a massive team fight game. You get into these early skirmishes like you see in a lot of TT games, and, there's not a lot of kill participation, and it's super disappointing. BLG and Gen G. I wonder what we can do here. Nothing. That's cool. Gen G and FPX. There's no way, right? Yeah, no way. You can do that. Let's see. So you can't do BLG with Gen G, right? Is that what we said? No. Yeah, so I mean, LNG and Victory 5 are both going to be super popular. They're going to take their popularity away from each other. I do think if you're looking for a safe game, finding a way to get FPX or Gen G into your lineups, you're taking a huge risk. You have a lot more downside in terms of what the outcome is. But I think both of those games go 2-0, whereas this BLG and this LNG series, they go 2-1. So you're going to be sweating out that third game as to whether or not, A, you're optimal based off of the first two games, or B, your team can get that win in the third game. I do think it's very sneaky to play Sandbox. I know that it's not an attractive spot. And I don't particularly like the term sneaky, even though I just used it. But, when you look at the way that they typically win, and I don't have it all updated here, but it's similar to this 15-16. They get a lot of kill participation. They're a good small stack. I think Dove is the guy that I'd want to attack on that when I'm playing this team. Again, if I was building like a lineup with like BLG or LNG or Rook, like we have a lot of good mid laners on the slate today. And so I think mid lane captain may, now that I think about it, be a little bit more popular than it might be on other slates, because you're going to want to play Rookie. You're going to want to play Donub. You're going to want to play, or Donby, whatever. If I said it wrong, I'm sorry. I apologize. You probably don't want to play Gory that much. Like, that's probably not one of your priorities. But, you got Chovy and Fofo and Closer if you're playing Sandbox. So, going mid-captain, I don't know. Like, if you think that it's going to be super popular and it's not going to be different today, then maybe you still go with the ADC. But maybe when you're building it, you're going with the mid on the other team and hoping that they're higher scoring, and that takes away from other people that have the ADC on that team, whether it's Light, whether it's Fodek, whether it's Doggo or LWX or even Ice or whoever's playing for there. So let's see. You got okay. Yeah, let me take a look. Let me open this up. Let's see if this is actually fun here. We'll give it a shot. What do we want to do? Close this, manage projections, copy, paste. Yeah, let's see if it's in here wrong. Let's try it again. Okay. Are we? There we go. Oh, I know why. Let's see. All right, we're going to give it one more try. I think I've resolved it. There we go. All right, let's take a look. go into the optimal. Wow. Let's do this. So if we're taking like 25 lineups, let's see if we go LNG and FPX. Let me change the settings. Let's make jungle possible. Let's apply that. Let's do this. Let's generate it. What can we do? What can we do? Yeah, a lot of jungle captains, but you do have the mid captain options. So I don't know how attractive that is, because when it comes down to it, if we're not getting that many mid captains, or they're not as... Oh, okay. So you have like 3 options. That should be semi-popular, maybe. I don't think people will play this, though. This lineup right here doesn't look like that would be something that I would want to play. FPX Gen G, projected points. No. I think that will be semi-popular. Why do I have that optimized? That's probably a good reason. So actually, there are a lot of different options. What can you do here? Yeah, no, it's Kale. It's because in Fantasy Labs, it's because you need, they have the name spelled incorrectly in here. You have to have an H. I just had to change kind of the heading row. That was the only thing that was the problem there. FPX for cash, yeah, absolutely. I think if you're playing cash, the problem is, who do you play FPX with? Like, you can't play them with Gen G. You can't play. I mean, I guess you can. You might be doing like a Gen G FPX. I think that's probably your safe cash lineup. Maybe you're doing like a top captain or something along those lines, because the other games are kind of coin flips. So unless you have a strong read on it, I don't know if you're necessarily going into any of those positions. Like FPX and BLG, you can't do. Let's see, can we add this? Let's see if this changes the game for us. Putting jungle captains in there, you have this lineup right here that you can do with BLG and FPX. FPX being the largest favorite on the slate, you probably want to have them there. TT does give up kills. It's just how many do they give and what kind of safety that you have. I think that the safety that you get with something like an FPX is you have the 4 winners in there. And maybe this is even a slate, if you feel like it, that you mix up some of the other guys, or, the strategy a lot of times for guys like Alex or Steinberg or, Giant Squid, and when they do their cash lineups where they have a lot of different, guys in there, maybe you do something with like 4 FPX, you throw a Gen G in there, and then you have 1 LNG and 1 Victory 5. The thought process is, now you've got 5 safe people in there if you're playing a head-to-head, where you're going to get 5 winners, and that you're actually going to get a 6th winner, because you're going to have that. Now, you might lose to some 4-3s, but anytime somebody takes a stand on like a BLG or a JDG or a Victory 5 or LNG, the probability is that they might have some losers there. And if they do have some losers, it's going to be 3 or 4. Whereas you're already guaranteed to have 5 winners. And that's the safety in that lineup, is you're putting the onus on the other person to pick the right side of a coin flip or something very close to it. Kind of just convictions that I have for this slate. I think you want to play the LNG Victory 5. I'm leaning towards LNG. I think Sandbox is fully in play. And I just have this feeling like if I'm avoiding a game, I might want to avoid that BLG JDG game and just be okay if it doesn't end up being the highest scoring one out there. I think it's getting a little bit too much attention. There's a little bit too much hype. And when you look at both of these teams and their game logs, you'll see just as many games that are not necessarily wildly bloody games. Whether it's JDG, they've had recently, but we're playing WE, OMG, and IG, teams that kind of necessitate that style of play. But when they played RNG earlier, when they've played FPX, when they've played some other teams, that hasn't necessarily been the way that they've played. And then certainly BLG has had their share of lower kill total games, especially if you're taking out the 34 kill fiesta against OMG and the 35 kill fiesta against IG, or that series as a whole. So I tend to believe that they play that series maybe a lot closer to how they played against TT, how they played against RNG, how they played against LNG, as opposed to how they played some of those other teams. And I don't know if that's how people will perceive it. I definitely think JDG's live. It's just a matter of, their ownership. But yeah, I think that's all I've got for today's show. I wanted to make it a little quicker. I know you guys asked for it, so I wanted to put something out there. Go reserve your lineups. Go build them. The slate starts in about 3 hours, and I'll see you guys in the Discord. Later.